The events in Syria may end in the defeat of the current regime if Assad does not receive help from the Russian Federation. Russian Armed Forces General Alexander Chaiko, who once led the failed operation to capture Kiev in 3 days, will be appointed commander of the Russian group in Syria. This is encouraging information for the Syrian rebels, since the unsuccessful Russian general may repeat his failure on another front entrusted to him. The Moscow Times writes that this gives hope to those who liberated Aleppo that they will be able to reach Damascus. Recall, while Russia and Iran are busy fighting on their borders, the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, which they support, has been unable to contain the attack by Islamist rebels. Thousands of rebels led by al-Qaeda splinter group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham entered Aleppo, Syria's second-largest city with a population of 2 million. Pictures and videos posted on opposition-linked social media showed them raising a flag in the city center and posing at the airport, the Financial Times reported. The offensive began from northwestern Syria's Idlib province, and by the end of the week the rebels had captured Aleppo to the east and dozens of other towns in the province, and had advanced towards the major city of Hama to the south, claiming to have captured at least 4 towns in Hama province. The Syrian military leadership denies this information and scares the rebels with the Russian army, which, according to them, will soon help them carry out a counteroffensive, covering them from the air. Bloomberg reported that conflicts in Syria always flare up when Russia and Iran are busy with their own business, fighting with other countries. It also said that Assad should not count on help from his allies since neither Russia nor Iran has time for him now. Since 2020, the situation in Syria has been fairly stable. Now, Russia and Iran are busy fighting wars with their neighbors, Ukraine and Israel, respectively, in which they are suffering huge losses. Russia is asking Turkey for help in resolving the crisis, Asia and Middle East expert Elena Supanina says, while Iran's influence in Syria has weakened as a result of Israel's devastating military campaign against Hezbollah and the intensification of Israeli airstrikes on Syrian territory. Moscow, meanwhile, now sees no need to sharply increase the level of support for Assad, Supanina believes.
Russian and Syrian jets stepped up their bombing of northwestern Syria, targeting rebel-held areas, Reuters reports. It is noted that aircraft from both nations struck the city of Idlib in northern Syria, a stronghold of the opposition. The attack coincided with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's vow to crush insurgents who recently advanced into Aleppo. Local residents reported that one of the strikes on the second day of the raids hit a densely populated residential district in central Idlib. This city, the largest within the rebel enclave near the Turkish border, is home to nearly 4 million people living in makeshift tents and shelters. Rescue workers stated that at least 7 people were killed at the scene, with dozens more injured. Meanwhile, the Syrian military and its ally, Russia, claimed they were targeting rebel group hideouts, denying accusations of attacks on civilians. On Saturday, Russian and Syrian jets bombed other towns across Idlib province, which recently fell under full rebel control following their boldest offensive in years. The civil war's front lines have largely been static since 2020. Earlier on Friday evening, rebels stormed into Aleppo, east of Idlib province, forcing Syrian forces to redeploy. The move marked the most significant challenge to Assad's rule in recent years. On November the 30th, Bashar al-Assad broke his silence regarding the unfolding situation, expressing hope for support from allies to counter the rebel advance. According to Assad, Syria continues to defend its stability and territorial integrity against all terrorists and their supporters. The Syrian dictator assured that the country is capable of defeating and destroying them with the help of its allies and friends, no matter how serious their terrorist attacks are. Russian troops are suffering losses during battles in Syria. Amid this, Moscow has replaced the commander of its forces in Syria, reports Ukrainian main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense via Telegram. Amid the losses and panic among Russian troops in Syria, the Kremlin has dismissed the commander of its forces in the country, General Sergei Kysel. Earlier, Kysel was responsible for Russia's failed actions during the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, for which he was also dismissed and subsequently sent on assignment to Syria. Kysel has been replaced by another military leader, General Alexander Chaiko, who had previously commanded Russian forces in Syria from 2017 and 2019. According to Ukrainian intelligence, the commander of the Russian Navy, Admiral Alexander Moiseyev, has also arrived at the naval base in Tartus. After 3 days of successful offensives by pro-Turkish forces in Syria, Russian troops suffered significant losses, with some units surrounded. Hundreds of Russians are listed as missing in Syria, the main intelligence directorate added.
Iraq has deployed armored vehicles to its border with Syria following surprise offensive of the opposition fractions led by Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. The Syrian insurgents' advance in Syria has caused concerns in Iraq. The Iraqi Defense Ministry stated on Monday that armored units of the Iraqi army were sent to reinforce the border, from the western border town of Al-Qaim to the border with Jordan further south. Any infiltration on the Syrian-Iraqi border is absolutely impossible, because of the fortifications and the combat units located there, Interior Ministry spokesman General Maqdad Miri said on the same day. The Defense Ministry added that similar forces were deployed along the border further north in Nineveh province. Iraq's decision to amass armored vehicles on the border follows last week's escalation of tension in Syria, where opposition forces captured the country's second-largest Aleppo city, forcing Bashar al-Assad's forces to retreat. Syrian opposition groups have captured a large amount of military vehicles from the government forces and continue to make gains. Earlier, Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that 200 fighters from a pro-Iran Iraqi armed group were being sent into Syria to support government forces.